This is the first attempt to write a full-fledged novel as such.
And is this therefore the start of a second career?
Well, it's too early to say. It all depends on how well this book does and whether I'm accepted as a fiction writer. That is a big transition, I think, which will have to be seen.
I was particularly struck by the commandant's English. He uses words like deuce, ruddy, blighter, darn, bugger. At times, there's a sort of hint of Colonel Blimp. Tell me, is that what regimental commandants are really like?
Well, no, that I think would be a reflection on the reading that I have been doing over the years. Maybe a bit of P.G. Wodehouse also comes in. And this is the vocabulary I picked up over the years. So I think that is somehow and subconsciously come into the commandant's language. It will all depend on how well this book does, whether Renuka and Rohit are accepted as, sleuths and detectives. And if that happens, then perhaps, yes, I could think of writing a few more books with the same people as the central characters.
So
but
there could be
set in different places and not necessarily murder mysteries.
So there could be a spate of Lieutenant Renuka Khatri mystery thrillers.
Yes, that's quite possible. Should, of course, as I said, this transition be successful.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. It's not every day that an army chief writes a novel. In fact, my guest today is the first to have done so since independence 77 years ago. Here's the book. It's called The Cantonment Conspiracy, a military thriller. And let me add, it's pacey, it's readable. I finished it literally in one sitting. I'm now joined by the author, former Chief of the Indian Army, General Manoj Naravane. General Naravane, you're the first and so far only Army Chief to have written a novel. That makes you, in a sense, unique. Is this something you've always wanted to do? And therefore, is this the start of a second career?
Thank you, Karan, for inviting me to speak to you. And it's always a pleasure, actually, to talk to you. And I was looking forward to this interview, which has been pending for a long time, but finally it has come to pass. To answer your question, yes, I have been writing from time to time. I had written a short story called Tiger Hill long time back, which was written when the Kargil war had happened. And it had got published in a magazine then by the Delhi press. Similarly, other small short stories I had been writing from time to time, but this is the first attempt to write a full-fledged novel as such.
And is this therefore the start of a second career?
Well, it's too early to say. It all depends on how well this book does and whether I'm accepted as a fiction writer. That is a big transition, I think, which will have to be seen.
Now, the book is called The Cantonment Conspiracy, a military thriller, and I'll hold it up again for the audience to see. What was it about the concept of a thriller that particularly attracted you?
Well, this idea of mystery had been floating in my mind for a long time. Sometime in the middle of last year, I had visited a station. I will not reveal which station. I had visited a station where I was staying in a civil guest house, and the ambiance there was quite similar to that of an officer mess. And in the evening, when I was having a stroll after dinner, I thought that was the ideal setting for a military or for a murder mystery. So that is where the germ of the idea came from. But of course, then I converted it to a military garrison, since that's what I know best.
Now, I don't want to give the story away because the joy of a thriller is not to know what's going to happen. But why don't you, in your own words, give the audience some sense of this story?
Well, as the blurb behind the book says, this is about two young officers who have just been commissioned into the army, and at the first place of posting itself, they come across this situation which puts to test both their characters and the ethos of the armed forces, and how they cope with this situation without compromising on their values. So while this is a murder mystery, there is also this underlying train of how the military ethos and character has to be maintained at all times.
Now, as you know better than me, General Naravane, thrillers are not easy to write. First, there's the plot. Then there's the pacing of the story, which must reach a climax as you get to the end. And finally, there's the tautness, the tension of the language. Did all of that come easily to you, or did you have to work on it?
No, obviously, I won't say it came easily. You have to work on it. But as I said, this idea was there for quite some time in my mind about the plot. And I'd been playing it over in my mind a couple of times. So the broad structure was in place. I, of course, put it down in writing with a timeline that this is how it has to get sequenced, and this is how various characters have to be introduced and at what stage, and then how the denouement has to happen. So there was a blueprint which I made, and then I was going as per that. But as the writing progressed, a lot of changes happened. So when you read chapter 7, I had to start making changes in chapter 3. So it is not as if it was all in one shot. It had to be a little bit of a iterative process.
So you were doing drafts, were you, as you were writing the book of other chapters?
Not drafts exactly, but minor changes in the previous chapters had to be done as I realized that either a point has not been brought in earlier, which then does not make sense when it comes in a later chapter, or if certain timelines were not really gelling. So those kind of differences, but otherwise, when the chapter was written, it was, I would say, 80% fair right from the beginning.
Now, as you said a moment ago, The book is about two central characters. They're two young, newly commissioned army officers. Let's talk about each of them one by one. The first is Lieutenant Rohit Verma, a third generation army officer. How much of Rohit is derived from your own experience and background, and how much of Rohit comes from your imagination?
Well, I am also a second generation service officer, but not from the army.
Absolutely. That's why I asked the question. Your father was a wing commander in the Air Force, I believe.
He was in the Air Force, and he was actually initially a army cadet. He was even in the IMA, but he suffered an injury while under training and had to be withdrawn. So, in a sense, I am a army brat. But I had other relatives in the army. Very few people know about it because I never advertised it. My cousin also retired as an army commander, but as I said, hardly anybody knows that. But when I was joining the army, my father said that don't go anywhere near them. Means don't join their regiments or their corps. Join something totally different. So that what you become, irrespective of what you become, will always be your own effort. Otherwise, people will say that ये तो अपने रिश्तेदार के वजह से बना है, या इसका तो बड़ा भाई था, या पिताजी ये थे. So I think Rohit's character reflects some of those contradictions, that sometimes being a third or second generation officer comes with certain advantages, but also comes with disadvantages, that people take you for granted and always believe that what you have achieved is because of having that godfather in the service.
In fact, at the very start of your book, Rohit, if I can use that word, suffers because he's a third generation army officer, because his father was commandant before he joined that particular regiment. And in fact, even the new commandant sort of tokos him on those grounds, doesn't he?
That's right, because as I said, it works both ways. Sometimes it's to your advantage, sometimes it's to your disadvantage. So obviously, I have not experienced that myself, but I can understand the pangs that second or third generation officers have to go through on this account.
Now, the second key character is Lieutenant Renuka Khatri. I believe she is the first woman to serve in an infantry regiment. What led you to create her?
Well, women started joining the NDA while I was in service, or just after I retired, but all the preparatory work had been done by us. And when I had gone for the passing out parade to the NDA just prior to my retirement, I was asked this question, that when will be the first ex-NDA woman officer become chief? And I'd said just in about 40 years from now, because that's how long it takes you to climb up the ladder. So that led me to think that, okay, when would the first woman officer from NDA actually get commissioned, which will happen now sometime in 2026. And that is where the book is set in the future, when the first ex-NDA woman officer gets commissioned. As you know, till now, we are not commissioning women into the combat arms. But looking ahead, I have made that also happen. It's a work of fiction, so you can let your imagination go wild. So that is how I've made the first women officer also get commissioned into an infantry regiment.
Now, in many ways, Renuka Khatri is a more powerful personality than Rahul Verma. And often she's the, how shall I put it, driving force of the story you're telling. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And this also stems from the fact that women officers have to work harder to prove themselves. in a predominantly male dominated environment. And that is what drives her to always excel in whatever she is doing, even if it means getting a little bit of flack from her fellow officers.
To what extent does she, in your mind's eye, represent the ideal qualities a good officer should have?
Well, I've drawn these characters. Actually, I don't want to give away too many things, but this character which I have portrayed, Renuka Khatri, is drawn from officers, women officers I have met while in service, who have performed exceedingly well. And as I always have maintained and maintain even now, when you look at a person, you must see look at him as an officer. And the gender comes later as of really no consequence. Is an officer performing his duties expected of him as an officer. Rest of it is all quite immaterial. And that is how I have put those qualities in the officer. I will not say him or her. I have put the qualities in the character which are expected of an officer. That is duty, honor, being able to distinguish right from wrong, and so on.
Now, in a very real sense, General Naravane, you've already answered my next question, but I'll still put it to you. In the very first few pages of your book, almost accidentally, one discovers that the book is set in the future. It's not set in the past. It's not even set in the contemporary world. It's about a series of events that happen sometime after June 2026. And the explanation you gave a moment ago is that is when you believe the first woman officer is likely to be commissioned. Was that the only reason you set it in the future? Or are there also explanations? For instance, it's easier to write fiction if it's not based in the contemporary world, if it's not rooted in what's happening around you.
No, it was not any deep thought like that for setting it into the future. It was more since I wanted the central character to be a women officer and ex-NDA at that, since I'm myself from the National Defense Academy. So that was happening only a year from now. Had I written this book 2 years hence, probably it would have still been set in 2026 and in the past. So it was a little bit, as we say in the army, situating the appreciation rather than appreciating the situation.
Now, I was particularly struck by the commandant's English. He uses words like deuce, ruddy, blighter, darn, bugger. At times, there's a sort of hint of Colonel Blimp. Tell me, is that what regimental commandants are really like?
Well, no, that I think would be a reflection on the reading that I have been doing over the years. Maybe a bit of P.G. Woodhouse also comes in. And this is the vocabulary I picked up over the years. So I think that is somehow and subconsciously come into the commandant's language.
But it's a delightful touch because as I read it, it brought the commandant alive as an individual character so different to anyone else.
Yes, that's true. And again, the commandant's character also shows how you have to be able to distinguish between right and wrong, how to give everybody a fair chance, not jump to conclusions. And that, I suppose, is because he's gone through the mill and has, again, decades of experience of the army and of life.
Now, one little quibble, if I may. There's a moment when the Commandant Brigadier Ashok Menon is talking to Rohit, and you write, pointing to the wall, he said, "Do you see that quote of Guru Nanak there? The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. As far as I know, that quotation is usually attributed to the British conservative politician Edmund Burke, although recently scholars have even begun to question that. Why have you attributed it to Guru Nanak? Where and when did he say it?
Well, most of these quotes, especially these older ones, have very tenuous origins and have been used by so many people over the years that it's very difficult to really say who said what when. In earlier years, many things were not so properly documented that you could, really pinpoint a particular time. But when I have put that, it is because I have seen it written somewhere and attributed to Guru Nanak. So I've just borrowed it from that.
Now that the Cantonment Conspiracy is published, are you working on a second novel? What sort of book is it likely to be? Could it be another military thriller?
Well, as I mentioned right in the beginning, it will all depend on how well this book does, whether Renuka and Rohit are accepted as, sleuths and detectives. And if that happens, then perhaps, yes, I could think of writing a few more books with the same people as the central characters.
So
But
there could be
set in different places and not necessarily murder mysteries.
so there could be a spate of Lieutenant Renuka Khatri mystery thrillers.
Yes, that's quite possible. Should, of course, as I said, this transition be successful.
Many people in that event will compare Renuka Khatri to Agatha Christie's Jane Marple.
I don't think I'm in that league as yet. But thank you all the same.
Now, according to Wikipedia, you're also said to be a keen painter and an enthusiastic gardener. Will there be an exhibition of your paintings sometime in the future?
Well, I've learned to write. I think I can learn to paint also. Wikipedia has got a lot of things wrong. I'm certainly not an artist, but there's always time to start new things. So, as I started writing works of fiction, but I don't think I'll go into the art world as yet.
Fiction and possibly military thrillers in particular is what is likely to be the future of General Naravane hereafter.
Yes, that's quite possible.
General Naravane, thank you very much for the time you've given me. I'm going to hold up the book once again for the audience. There it is. It's called The Cantonment Conspiracy, a military thriller. And let me add, I found it riveting. Take care, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you very much for that very encouraging endorsement. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.